Hi, I'm Kent,
And I'm Anna.
and this is Film and Family, a podcast about feature filmmaking for professionals in the film industry with families. Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in. All right, today we wanted to talk to you about learning new skills and how to achieve mastery. So this is a process that I always go over with my clients. It's called the stages of competence. In psychology, this is a learning model, and it relates with the process of moving from incompetence to competence in a skill. So this applies to when we're teaching our children new skills and they need to learn them, or when we are learning them ourselves. It's just really helpful to have an overview and understand what's happening inside our brains as we learn, so that we can know what phase we're in and kind of what actions to take to move into the next phase as we progress. There's 4 stages. So stage 1 is called the unconscious incompetence. Okay. And it might help you to think about one area of your life where you are trying to learn a skill and just see where you fit in. What part of the process are you in right now? So the first stage with the unconscious incompetence is basically when you are in the dream phase. So you're imagining what it would be like to make a feature film or to be a parent and have your own kids. And everyone starts in this phase until they actually experience something for the first time.
This is really normal in like film school. It's a really hard phase to be in. Well, it's not a hard phase to be in, to be honest, but it's something that I think we all go through when we watch masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece, and you watch these best of the best films, and then mediocre films you don't even think are that good, and then there's like really terrible films that you kind of don't even watch anymore. And then you try to make a film and you realize you're making some of the worst films you've never seen. and that leads us into the second stage, which is conscious incompetence. But unconscious incompetence is this phase where we really like, it's exciting because there's nothing stopping us because we haven't even tried it yet. And so we're always sure that we're going to be the best parents in the world and that we're going to make the best movies ever.
So it's a fun stage, actually, like the ignorance of imagining. And we usually do imagine, like you said, Kent, that we're going to be really good at whatever we want to do, that we're going to be great parents, that we're going to be amazing directors, that we're going to be able to drive a car just like we've seen a million people do a million times. And you are in this stage if you have no firsthand experience, no matter how much you may have read about something or learned about it, or even observed someone else using the skill that you want or being in the role that you want to have. Until you've actually experienced it firsthand, you are in stage 1. One of my favorite analogies is to think of a baby learning to walk. So babies, when they are born, obviously they don't know how to walk. And for a while, the baby just lays on their back and watches people walk. That is the dream stage. That is unconscious incompetence. The baby is not able to walk and not really aware that they're not able to walk, but might start to think about walking or observe people walking.
I think one of the nice things about this phase is that, sometimes we think of it as a bad thing, but I think we should always be in this phase in different ways, because people in this phase usually are too ignorant to know how unrealistic, quote unquote, their dreams are. And it reminds me of a line from the movie Amazing Grace, which was a really cool Michael Apted film from like 2006, where an unfamous Benedict Cumberbatch says, who's talking about running for parliament, is told by his friend that no one our age has ever taken power. And he says, which is why we're too young to know that some things are impossible, so we'll do them anyway. And I like that idea of, I guess we haven't really learned for ourselves yet how hard this is, so we're just gonna do it anyway, and everyone's gonna warn us against it, and we're just gonna do it. You know.
Yeah, and we always start every episode of this podcast saying, let's jump right in. And that's really how you have to learn something. So it's true that if you don't enter this dream phase, you're never going to take that leap to jump in. So once you've jumped in, you jump into stage two, which is conscious incompetence. So suddenly you're becoming conscious or aware of your incompetence, your inability to do the skill, whatever that skill might be. If we go back to the baby analogy, the baby tries to walk for the first time and falls down, right? No baby walks the first time they try. So they try to walk, they fall
I bet.
down.
I bet there was one, maybe two.
Well, the thing is with a baby is their muscles are actually not even strong enough to support their weight. And so inevitably the first time they try, they will fall. And they will keep trying and they will keep falling. And hopefully they'll keep trying and keep falling all the way into the next stage. So this stage can be really difficult because it feels like you're always failing because you are in this stage. Every single time you try, you fail. And it feels like there's no progress, but it's not true. You really are progressing because the beautiful thing is whenever the baby falls down and gets back up, that trying and falling and getting back up is what strengthens the baby's muscles to be able to support his or her weight. The muscles are growing from that experience of failing over and over again. And the same is true for you. And this stage, when we're learning a more complicated skill could take years.
Well, what's interesting to me about more complicated skills, for example, parenting, which is something we talk a lot about, or filmmaking, which is what we talk a lot about. Those are very complicated skills, right? They're huge and they're really big. And they're made up of like a gazillion smaller skills, right? Like finishing your first feature, depending on what roles you play, even if you play one role, like let's say it's not even directing, it's just cinematography. Cinematography alone requires tons and tons of little skills associated with it. Specifically, there's skills associated to like shooting for 30 days straight. And there's skills related to organizing and running big crews or small crews and working as a thrifty sort of run and gun thing, or learning how to save money or make money stretch a long way. And then there's the actual skills of cinematography. And then there's relationship building and narrative storytelling and understanding narrative sense and whatever. There's so many little skills. And so that's why I think that this phase also, once again, we should always be looking to jump into this place of conscious incompetence, because even if we've made 100 feature films, let's say, there's always some other skill that's a part of, like, yeah, maybe we're really good at starting and finishing a feature film, but that's only one sort of skill of like starting and finishing the whole pipeline. But if you go deeper, then you can find, well, you know what? I've never really done a heavy VFX film, or I've never really like told a story in this way, or I'm not actually good at, I don't know, maybe I'm not that good at directing non-actors or whatever. And so I think it's good to find little things that maybe we're not good at and work hard into those things, because all likelihood is that we're not going to be able to just ride a one-trick pony for very long. And that's really going to kill our career if we think, I'm just going to do this one little tiny piece of the puzzle over and over and over again. So, but I just think that's the best way to grow, is find somewhere where if you aren't at all in a place where you're like, I am in over my head, I really am fully aware of how bad I am at this thing, then I actually think that's why first, early filmmaking is often some filmmakers' best work, because when they are in that conscious incompetence, it requires like their most aware, most aggressive sort of attention. Their mind has to be so present upon the mechanism, and sometimes it really hurts a film, right? Like when it's so incompetent. But then sometimes magic starts to happen, because they have to put so much effort in. So if it's not hard, I just always think that there should be at least one foot there where you're just extending yourself at all times. And even worse than that, not only does it maybe not lead to the best filmmaking, but it just means you're not growing. So this
Yeah,
phase is super not comfortable, but we have a whole podcast called Come In, Make Yourself Uncomfortable, because it's an important phase to be in some way in your life, I think, because it means you're growing.
absolutely. And I think it's good to just know where this fits in the process, that when you're in that stage where you're failing and you are incompetent, that your muscles are growing from the failing, that you are growing and learning, even though it doesn't look like your results are changing or there's any progress. It's all internal before it's external. So the baby is learning mentally and building muscle internally, and that will eventually manifest itself in a physical step. But at first, it's all internal. Another analogy that's great is learning to drive a car, which is another one where it's not as big as feature filmmaking or parenting, which are huge. I don't think you can even call that one skill. In the Film and Family Academy, we break it down as simply as we can into steps. And each one of those steps, I think, is a skill that you develop that might be comparable to learning to drive a car, which again still breaks down into a skill set. You have to learn how to turn the keys and start the ignition, how to turn on your blinker, how to look at your blind spots. There are lots of things going on that you have to be able to do at the same time or in sequence and know when to use them at what time. So, yeah, every skill has basically a set of meta skills that you will need to learn, and all of that growth is going to be internal before you see an external manifestation of it. So if you feel like you're in this stage in any part of your life where you're continuously failing at reaching your goal, know that you are growing and that this is part of the process of learning, and it's a very healthy part of it. Stick with it and you'll get to the next stage. So the next stage is kind of a fun stage at first. It can be frustrating as well. Stage 2 and 3 are where most people give up. But I still think stage 3 feels a little better than stage 2. Stage 3 is called conscious competence, which means you are competent now. Yay. But it takes conscious effort and focus. So this is what you were talking about, Kent, with the some of the best work can come from probably this stage, because you're not incompetent, you are competent, but it takes a lot of focus.
I
And
remember the day
that
I
focus
became
can
consciously competent.
oh yeah.
Yeah, it was a good day. Glad I never have to go back to that other incompetent stuff.
So with going along with our baby analogy, this is where the baby takes their first step, which if you're a parent, you know is very exciting. When your baby finally succeeds and you've watched them try and fail and they finally do it. And even a baby has a realization of, I did it. I
Yeah.
took a step.
And you know what's really great is like when you get into the conscious competent stage, you can actually start making adult analogies and not just baby analogies.
I guess I'm not there yet. So,
Sorry.
anyway, so the baby takes his first step and with enough focus is able to take steps. So there's definitely still a lot of failure in this stage. You are aware that you're competent, and with enough focused effort, you can do it. But there's still failures and there's still that degree of focus needed to complete the task, which can be sometimes frustrating. I think the tendency in this stage that people have is just to compare themselves to other people and to see other people who have reached a greater level of competence and say, why is it so easy for that person? You know, you think of a baby watching people walk. Why is it so easy for my sibling who's a few years older to walk around and run and move their body, and I have to focus on every single step and I still fall down. So same thing with driving. I remember when I was first learning to drive, I had to focus so hard and I couldn't imagine how people could drive and eat at the same time or talk on the phone
Now I
because I
drive,
was
eat, and
thinking
talk on
so
the phone
hard.
all the time.
Good for you. Don't crash.
I get tickets all the
um
time too, without any
yeah,
effort.
yeah, I bet you do. So the conscious competence is exciting in some ways because you are capable of reaching your goal, but it is still a phase where people give up. And it is still a phase where if you compare yourself too much to other people in your progress, you might just decide that you're not cut out for it, or that you haven't progressed as much as you want to be progressing. So it is easy to get stuck in this phase as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the only way to move through phases is this really persistent repetition. Because like you said, you could get stuck in this phase, you can get stuck in any phase. And I think it's because you'll get stuck in any phase if you either give up or you don't just do it frequently enough. So, for example, one thing that I have a hard time doing is really progressing in terms of weightlifting, because I'll go to the gym hard for a week or two, and then I'll go off for 3 or 4 weeks. Sometimes I'll go months without going, and then I'll get back into like this heavy routine. Same with running, and that's just part of my life. I'm filmmaking a lot. I'm a parent right now, especially in our life. There's lots of other things going on. So I don't feel really guilty about this. This isn't like one of my top priorities, but I'm not going to be benching 400 or anything like some of these big guys, because I just don't do it enough. I'm off too often to revert back and then go back to other phases, and always jumping back into it. I'll still keep progressing, but it'll just be a really long journey. And that progress might see a lot of repeat learning, and not just learning, but just building. You build that muscle. So physical analogies are nice because it's like gardening or farming. There's no magic shortcuts, right? You got to do
Yeah.
the work and you got to go through it. And so if you let your whole farm die, whatever progress you made, you're pretty much starting over anyway. But maybe you've learned. But anyway, they're not really analogies. It's just different skills are different. Whereas like riding a bike comes back pretty fast. But I
Yeah.
feel like with filmmaking, it's like if I were to just take like a 20-year break, the industry and the technology and the machinery of it all will have changed so much. It'll be a rough re-entry, and maybe some of the theoretical stuff will come back really fast, and that's natural. But the more consistent you are, the more likely you're going to be able to move through the phases. So that's just what came to my mind as you mentioned that.
That's a good point. I do think consistency, you're already going to have a lot of repetition. That's just what practice is. But consistently practicing something means you don't have to lose progress and go back and start farther back than you were before because you've lost time. Your muscles maybe have atrophied a little bit, or
Or a lot.
or a lot, or your skills, you need to sharpen them. But if you're consistent, that's a thing. It also makes me think of the 10,000 hour rule, which is from the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about how masters have spent 10,000 hours in their craft. And that seems to be sort of a threshold. Once they pass the 10,000 hours, they start to really excel at whatever they're doing. And that was true even across disciplines, hockey players and artists, and no matter what you're doing, there is that threshold where there was a statistically significant difference in the success of people who put that many hours of practice into something. I think that repetition over and over and over again gets us to a level of mastery that will bring success.
And I think that that's really important to remember as parents and as filmmakers, which is the two biggest things I feel like we talk about here, not just parenting, but like relationships in general, like marriage and
Mhm.
whatever. And it's like we sometimes wonder, why is this not any better yet? Why haven't I had a big break yet? Why am I not making the kind of money I want to be making yet? Why am I not so skilled? Why isn't this easy yet? And I think we have to remember, just ask yourself, I mean, if you have to, stop and do the math. Have I put in 10,000 hours yet? Have I truly moved into stage 4 of mastering this skill? And if not, it just makes sense why people would look at you and go, I mean, it's not just a granted, wow, that person has truly achieved whatever level.
It. Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting it. Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't have to, we don't have to feel bad about that. And I don't really believe that there's such things as prodigies most of the time, especially in filmmaking. Because filmmaking's too big. You can be a prodigy at like one thing, but filmmaking, it's just too many things. And same with our relationships with our families. That takes a long time to work on. And honestly, most of the time we're not working on those skills. We're just living life and trying to ignore sometimes the responsibilities relating to our relationships. That's certainly the case in our childhood. We don't work on our relationship with our parents. It just is what it is, you know? And then as you grow up, you start to read parenting books. That's when you're actually putting the work in. You start to read marriage books or relationship books or self-help books or whatever. And or you sign up for Film and Family Academy and you start to watch coursework on these things, or you get coached on things and you learn thought work and the model. Those are ways that you actually start to master yourself in terms of, how do I think? How do I improve my relationships? How do I become a better filmmaker? And those are the hours. Those are the 10,000 hours. It's not just 10,000 hours. Well, I hit record and I rolled for 10,000 hours. Shouldn't I be
Yeah.
the best? It has to be 10,000 active hours of actually learning.
That's such a good point, because that process of evaluating and learning and improving can only happen if you're doing the right kind of practice, which is also something that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his book. If you are practicing something incorrectly, then you become better and better at doing it incorrectly or
Yeah.
poorly.
The better you are at doing the wrong thing, the wronger you are.
Yeah, like if what you practice when you're practicing parenting is yelling at your kids, you just get better and better at yelling at your kids
I'm
because that's what
so
you
good at that.
practice. I'm pretty good at that one sometimes. But if you want to do something else instead, you have to practice that. And it's going to take conscious effort to practice something intentionally, to evaluate yourself and say, how did I do today? To read the parenting book and learn skills, learn how to build the skills that you want. I don't think all skills take 10,000 hours. I think what Malcolm Gladwell was looking at specifically was people who are very successful outliers in their industry. So they're people who really stand out. And a lot of them had a good amount of success before they became world famous, recognized as the masters of their craft. So you can still have success along the way. It's not like you have to wait till you're old and have done this for 10,000 hours to have any amount of success. But if you really want to stand out in the industry, that's a whole other level, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good point to make. Conscious competence is usually when you start to make a decent living doing this stuff as a filmmaker, or when you start to actually have good days with your kids and you start to go, I'm really growing as a person, as a parent, as a spouse. I am growing as myself, not just things are getting better because circumstances are good. I am growing. I am able to become more resilient and I'm learning, and so that kind of progress is huge. And that's why I think we need to stay in that conscious incompetence phase, meaning do it for 10,000 hours, actually have a conscious working practice. And imagine, who are the people with 10,000 hours of parenting, intentional parenting, really reading the books, really trying, really evaluating day after day. That's an easy one to get a lot of hours on,
Yeah.
especially for any of us who are
Just
full
like
time.
walking.
Yeah, yeah. And like filmmaking, sometimes we feel like it's hard to get a lot of hours on it, but what are the periphery skills that you're going to need to learn? Well, relationships is one of them. It's just essential to all careers. So soft skills are huge for anything. And then there's the hard skills. And the hard skills aren't as important, but get 10,000 hours in on the hard skills. If you want to be a DP and you just start, well, I don't have 10,000 hours of, managing a big crew and using tons of big lighting equipment and stuff than just get 10,000 hours using a camera at all. Get 10,000 hours of maybe learn to draw and render light and get a camera and shoot film and digital and, just shoot random stuff constantly and edit and color your own stuff so that you get other knowledge about it. You figure out what those periphery skills are, and you'll quickly find yourself mastering those so deep enough that you're going to start to get hours on sets where you do have crew. It's just going to take time, but it's not going to happen until you've mastered the other stuff. And so, if you're directing and you're like, when do I ever get to be on set directing actors? Well, maybe you start acting. Maybe start making lots of short films so that you can, those are quicker. And so you can get on set and direct more actors. Go into theater and you'll get to direct actors day after day after day after day because all you do is rehearse. So if you're an actor, that's why I think some of the best actors come from theater. I really do, because actors from theater, they are so good at memorization. They are so good at taking dialogue that is maybe not even that well written, or is just for some reason hard to write, or hard to deliver, and they just deliver it. Like expert Shakespearean actors, we all know, are some of the best in the world because those are hard lines to make human when they come out of your mouth. And yet when you can make it human and you can deliver it all from a place of reality for yourself as an actor, and you access that realism, so theater, it just puts you in this place where you're putting in hours and hours every day. So you're really racking it up. So figure out whatever those skills are for you and put yourself in a position to be doing them like crazy, which is one of the reasons I did this really awful thing, which is make lots of wedding videos. That's not something I wanted to do as a feature filmmaker, as an aspiring feature filmmaker. I really love cinematography. I like directing, but it gave me a lot of documentary experience. It's a weird kind of documentary. It's not my first choice, but I got a lot of hours on a camera with lenses. I got a lot of hours coloring my own footage and editing. And a lot of those skills started to get so second nature to me that I started getting paid to do those things in other ways. And then I started applying that to other things that I liked more. And then that passion work turned into paid work. And so, that's just a simple example, but it goes into all of our skills.
I think it's important to remember that conscious competence is not that different from unconscious competence in many ways. They're both competent. So the last stage is stage 4 is unconscious competence, which is basically when it becomes unconscious. You don't have to think about it anymore to walk or to drive or to do whatever the skill is. It happens automatically on default. Both of those stages are competent. One just requires a lot more focus, and the other doesn't require as much focus. So it allows you to focus on the next skill that you're learning. It allows you to focus on the next thing and keep expanding those skills, and to do it without even having as much effort, which for a skill like driving or walking, you don't really need to expand on that. It's just something that you don't have to think about anymore. So one less thing. But with film, I think that's why it can lead to mastery if you keep going through all of these stages, because once you don't have to think about where's the record button and how do I set up this camera for the shot and how do I switch my lens and all the little details, then you can think about next level thoughts, next level that you're learning. But competence will do just fine. If you, as a parent, have to focus and you're in conscious competence, but you are performing the way you want to as a parent with that conscious attention until your kids leave home, that can work just great. It does require effort for the whole time, but that effort is competent. It is creating the results that you want most of the time with some slip ups, right?
Yeah, and that's really interesting. How often can we tell the difference who's behind the wheel? An unconsciously competent driver or a 16-year-old who's been driving for 3 months? No one can tell the difference. And here's the thing, you might say, well, I can tell the difference when they do that stupid thing or make that big mistake. But the unconscious competent drivers make those mistakes too because they're paying so little attention to their driving, right? They're trying to do six other things anyway because they just think driving is so easy and they slip up. And I think it's the same with filmmaking. Sometimes masters make films that are okay. They're not actually their best work because it's so easy at that point that getting the financing is fast for them and getting a movie made is fast. And maybe because there's not as much resistance or pressure, they're not on their A game.
You
Whereas,
don't have to pay attention to
yeah,
it, so you
yeah,
might not.
yeah. And then you get these guys who are trying so hard, it requires all their focus to be able to make a good film that they actually make a masterpiece. And then everyone says, whoa, these guys are at the same level as this other guy, or this is the next Spielberg or whatever. And well, frankly, they're not probably at the same level because they just don't have the same experience and they probably haven't graduated that to that unconscious competence. But they seem to be willing to do the work. It probably takes them longer. It probably takes them a lot more effort. But in the end, we watch the movie and we think it's great. And I think that's encouraging because if it feels like parenting is really hard, it doesn't actually mean necessarily that you're way worse at it. Now, sometimes you just will feel that way and it is just hard. Same with marriage. If you think that you're not that good at being married, or if your marriage isn't that great, putting in tons of effort, it just means you've got to put in tons of effort. And you'll eventually get to the point where it's actually really easy to just feel great in your relationship. But for a long time, it's just going to take a ton of effort. So I think it's nice realizing that because I think what happens is a lot of us have this thing pop into our head where we're like, why is it so hard? It shouldn't be this hard. It doesn't seem this hard for everyone else. Well, because when we're driving down the road, we don't look at all the other cars and go, look how hard of a time all these other cars are having. It actually might be that one of the drivers is really scared and it's their first time on the freeway and they are having a hard time, but you can't tell. Maybe they're really nervous, they're really trying to stay in their lane, but you can't tell that that's the driver's experience from the outside. And often people can't tell from the outside what our home life looks like. People on the outside can't tell what it looked like to make a film. So a film that was really hard and had a lot of drama might be awesome. It might be a great film. And a film that was easy and a super good experience might be the same, but you just don't know. How did the crew get along? Did people like it? Was it everyone was making tons of mistakes? Did they lose like a whole day of footage? The movie still might turn out, even though it was really hard. So I think it's good to realize that, look, this super, super hard. Like it's going to be super hard for 10,000 hours of it,
Yeah,
then
and if
you'll
you can drop
graduate.
that expectation that it shouldn't be hard, then you can settle into this conscious competence and just focus, say it's going to be hard. I'm in the stage where I have to focus still.
Yeah, and
And
if you're
so
so
I'm going
fixated,
to.
if you're so fixated on your developing competence and how difficult and the difficulty of it, that's stealing away from the focus that you really need for the task at hand because you are still in that conscious competent phase. And so by fixating on why is this so hard, you're actually making it harder.
Yeah, because you're being self-conscious, so you're focusing on comparing yourself or being critical of yourself as
Mhm.
opposed to just focusing on the task.
So stage 2.5 is self-conscious competence.
I love it.
I feel like my job in this episode of the podcast has been to keep you in the conscious competence phase by making jokes that sort of throw off the rhythm.
Yeah, you've been making a lot of jokes. So, stage 4, I basically talked about already. The way that you know you're in stage 4 is that you don't have to think about it anymore. And because you don't have to think about it when we enter stage 4, and often I see this with my clients when I coach them and they reach this level of competence in a specific skill they've been working on, is that they won't even recognize the change. And sometimes I'll point it out to them and say, do you remember why you wanted coaching in the first place or what you first came struggling with in the first place? And now it's not even a struggle for you. And most people don't even notice it until I point it out. And so it's just so gradual where your brain has delegated it to the default subconscious. And that's probably true for you in so many ways. And you just don't even really recognize those.
Not all skills require 10,000 hours to master. And so little
Right.
tiny skills, it is true that sometimes it seems like this impossible task. And even graduating from conscious incompetence to conscious competence is a massive accomplishment because you can actually do it. And I remember when we ran our first marathon, I remember, Anna, you said that you'd heard someone mention running 10 miles a day, and that sounded unfathomable to you,
Yeah.
like impossible. And then you realized one day that you'd been running 10 miles a day for a couple weeks, and you were getting to this place where we could talk the whole time. And it
Yeah.
was really exciting, right? And is that unconscious competence? Almost, right? It kind of is. I mean, at least at that
For the
mile,
10-mile milestone. Yeah.
right? And at the pace that we were running it, right? If we decided to run 6-minute miles, then it would have been a whole different game. No more are you unconsciously competent at that, but just getting them running in, you start to get this unconscious competence, and it doesn't take 10,000 hours. It took less. And it's the same with a lot of these skills in the Film and Family Academy. Feature filmmaking is one thing, but some of these people, they'll bring stuff to the table, and just in the 12-week coaching period or less, they'll start off by feeling like time management or just my thoughts around money or whatever are so bad or so hard or so in this realm of another world that I could never see myself on the other side of this. And less than 12 weeks, suddenly they're so good at this stuff that they go back and look back and say, oh, I forgot I even had that problem. That is crazy to me. It's honestly crazy to me every time I see it. It's not because I don't have any faith in our the coaching and in the model and in the coursework that we have, but it's kind of amazing to see human beings progress so much in this course every single time people go through it. And not just this course, but this membership, to see people go through it in 12 weeks, see several parts of their life totally dramatically change and shift. And it's stunning. It's just a testament to me of when we focus on something hard, when we start to focus on it and work at it the right way and practice it the right way, transformation is not only possible and real, it's inevitable. And because we see it over and over and over again.
Well, and it's easy to see in other people. I think what surprises me is how many times I see these massive changes and how unaware someone can be of their own change, how they don't even see it happen. And for me, it's every week I see their improvements, I see the progress, but then by the end, they still don't even see it. And so it's very difficult to see our own progress, but it is happening. And I want you to know that it's happening. And hopefully these stages help you see it a little bit more as you move through them. And the other little tip that I think helps is to focus in on something smaller. Breaking down a big process into smaller steps is one way to see a lot of rapid growth. I think when you focus in on one area of your life or one stage of the filmmaking process, and you can really focus on developing your skills in that area, then you start to see that progress quicker because you've broken it into smaller pieces. All right, that's all we have for you today. Hope that helps, and hope you can see some progress in your life through these stages and identify where you might be in the 4 stages in whatever you're working on. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Film and Family Academy.
Yeah, the Academy is a membership, and it includes coursework and coaching, and it's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish your first feature film by the end, or we'll give you your money back. And the best thing about it is that we will teach you how to do this without having to sacrifice your relationships with yourself or with your family or with anyone. We'll do this without having to sacrifice your values or the things that you feel like make you you or your sanity. And you can sign up for a free consultation at www.invisiblemansion.com/film and family, or you can just click the link in the show notes.
Yep. We'll see you next time.
Talk to you later. Bye.